Philippine Sea, June 19, 1944, 08:30 hours. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, commanding the Japanese mobile fleet from the bridge of carrier Taiho, observes through binoculars as his strike aircraft launched toward American task forces reported 200 miles distant, where Japanese intelligence estimates indicate 6 to 8 American fleet carriers, supported by escort vessels constituting what Imperial Navy planners consider a manageable opposing force. That Japanese carrier aviation, with superior pilot training, longer-range aircraft, and tactical coordination refined through 3 years of Pacific warfare, can defeat through aggressive offensive operations that exploit Japanese numerical parity and doctrinal advantages. What Vice Admiral Ozawa cannot possibly know, what no Japanese naval officer could comprehend, despite meticulous intelligence gathering and tactical preparation, is that American shipyards have launched 15 Essex-Class fleet carriers since January 1943, with 9 additional units under construction, representing industrial production rates that create 1 new fleet carrier every 67 days, while each Essex-Class vessel carries 90 to 100 aircraft, compared to Japanese carriers' 50 to 60 plane capacity, operates damage control systems that allow survival of torpedo and bomb hits that would sink Japanese carriers, and forms part of Task Force 58, commanded by Admiral Marc Mitscher, whose actual strength includes 15 fleet carriers, 9 light carriers, 7 battleships, and 956 aircraft, naval power exceeding the combined strength of all other world navies, while representing less than 60% of total American Pacific Fleet capability. Within 12 hours, the mathematical and industrial reality of American carrier dominance will transform the Battle of the Philippine Sea from what Japanese doctrine anticipated as decisive engagement into systematic destruction of Japanese carrier aviation that eliminates the Imperial Navy's offensive striking power forever, demonstrating how American industrial capacity, combined with revolutionary carrier design, has created naval capabilities that Japanese shipbuilding limitations and resource constraints cannot match, counter, or survive against in sustained operations.
Japanese naval intelligence operating with incomplete information about American industrial transformation and limited reconnaissance of American shipyards projects American Pacific Fleet strength during mid-1944 at 8 fleet carriers and perhaps 12 light carriers, based on known pre-war American naval construction programs plus estimated wartime additions. These calculations assume American shipbuilding operates according to traditional maritime construction methods, where individual craftsmanship and sequential assembly create timelines that Japanese experience confirms as industry standard. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What Japanese intelligence fundamentally fails to comprehend is the complete transformation of American shipbuilding from craft-based construction to industrial mass production, applying automotive assembly techniques to warship construction. The Essex-Class carrier program demonstrates this revolution through modular construction, where prefabricated sections manufactured at multiple facilities assemble at shipyards using systematic workflows that reduce construction time by 60% compared to traditional methods. The Newport News Shipbuilding Company constructs USS Essex in 20 months from keel laying to commissioning during 1941-42, establishing baseline construction timeline. By 1943, systematic improvements reduce construction time to 14-15 months for subsequent Essex-Class units, with some vessels completing in as little as 12 months from keel laying through lessons learned and process optimization that American industrial management applies continuously. The mathematical reality hidden from Japanese strategic planning is that American shipyards operate 4 primary construction sites building Essex-Class carriers simultaneously. Newport News Bethlehem Fall River, Philadelphia Navy Yard, and Norfolk Navy Yard, creating parallel production that launches new fleet carriers at 67-day intervals during peak production periods. This production rate, combined with 8 additional light carrier construction programs, creates American carrier force expansion that exceeds Japanese carrier construction by margins approaching 15-1 when measured in aircraft capacity deployed.
Japanese confidence in June 1944 rests on decades of carrier aviation development, creating what many naval historians consider the world's most professionally trained carrier air groups operating from carriers whose design emphasizes offensive striking power over defensive protection. The Imperial Japanese Navy pioneered carrier aviation through a 1920s, 30s development programs that established carrier doctrine, aircrew training standards, and tactical procedures that other nations subsequently adopted. Vice Admiral Ozawa commands carrier forces including veterans of Pearl Harbor, Indian Ocean raids, and Coral Sea operations, crews whose combat experience and professional training Japanese doctrine considers decisive advantages over American forces whose rapid expansion diluted peacetime professionalism through wartime mass training programs. Japanese naval aviators average 600 to 800 flight hours before carrier qualification compared to American aviators' 200 to 300 hours, creating apparent skill advantages that Japanese planners believe compensate for numerical disadvantages. The carrier Taiho herself represents Japanese naval engineering at peak effectiveness, displacing 29,300 tons and mounting armored flight deck protection that Japanese designers believe provides survivability against American dive bombing attacks. Taiho's aircraft complement of 53 fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes includes the newest Japanese aircraft types with performance characteristics that Japanese technical intelligence suggests match or exceed American carrier aircraft capabilities. Japanese carrier strike doctrine emphasizes coordinated attacks by fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes executing from multiple approach vectors to overwhelm American defensive capabilities through simultaneous engagement from different altitudes and directions. This tactical approach, refined through years of training and combat experience, represents sophisticated offensive doctrine that Japanese commanders consider superior to American defensive-oriented carrier operations. Admiral Soimu Toyota, commanding Combined Fleet Operations, has authorized the Philippine Sea engagement based on calculations suggesting Japanese carrier aviation can achieve favorable exchange ratios through superior pilot training, aircraft range advantages allowing attacks beyond American strike radius, and tactical coordination that American forces cannot match. Toyota's operational planning assumes Japanese carriers operating within land-based air support range from Philippine bases creates local superiority compensating for American numerical advantages. The strategic foundation for Japanese confidence appears mathematically sound when analyzing individual carrier and aircrew capabilities comparing Japanese professional training against American mass-produced forces. These calculations, however, ignore industrial capacity differences, creating American force regeneration capabilities that render tactical exchange ratios strategically irrelevant when American replacement capacity exceeds Japanese maximum available strength.
What Japanese naval intelligence completely failed to detect was the revolutionary carrier design philosophy embodied in the Essex-Class that prioritized mass production, damage survivability, and aircraft capacity over individual ship superiority. The Essex-Class development began in 1939-40 when American naval architects recognized that future carrier warfare would emphasize sustained operations rather than decisive single engagements, requiring carrier designs optimized for industrial production and operational endurance. The design specifications established radical departures from previous American carrier construction, including 27,100-ton standard displacement, allowing 90 to 100 aircraft capacity compared to previous American carriers' 80-plane limit, enhanced aviation fuel storage providing extended operations without replenishment, and damage control systems incorporating lessons from early Pacific combat that Japanese carriers never implemented systematically. The damage control revolution proves particularly significant, with Essex-Class carriers featuring compartmentalized aviation fuel systems with CO2 flooding capability, redundant electrical power generation preventing single-point failures, and trained damage control parties stationed throughout the ship responding to battle damage through systematic procedures that British and American combat experience proved essential for carrier survival. Commander Joseph Wilcox, serving as damage control officer aboard USS Essex during her 1943 shakedown, describes the systematic approach. Every compartment features firefighting equipment, damage control parties drill continuously in firefighting and flooding control, and redundant systems ensure battle damage to one area doesn't compromise entire ship functionality. The design assumes carriers will be hit and provides systems ensuring they continue operating after damage that would sink previous carrier designs. The aircraft capacity advantage proves equally revolutionary, with Essex-class hangars accommodating 36 fighters, 36 dive bombers, and 18 torpedo bombers as standard complement, numbers exceeding Japanese fleet carrier capacity by 40 to 60%. This capacity advantage multiplies through American logistics, providing rapid aircraft replacement, allowing Essex-class carriers to sustain high operational tempo through replacing combat losses within days rather than weeks. The propulsion system demonstrates American engineering priorities, with 4-shaft geared turbine plant generating 150,000 horsepower for 33-knot maximum speed, sufficient for task force operations while emphasizing reliability over maximum performance. The engineering plants feature redundancy, allowing battle damage to engine rooms without immobilizing the ship, a survivability feature that Japanese carrier design rarely incorporated. The anti-aircraft armament reflects American recognition that carrier defense requires overwhelming defensive firepower, with Essex-class vessels mounting 12 5-inch dual-purpose guns, 44 68 40mm Bofors cannons, and 52 20mm Oerlikon guns, creating defensive firepower exceeding Japanese carrier anti-aircraft capabilities by 300 to 400%. This defensive emphasis creates self-protecting capability, reducing reliance on escorting vessels for air defense.
As Vice Admiral Ozawa's strike aircraft depart toward American task forces during morning hours of June 19th, Japanese aircrew follow attack doctrine, emphasizing coordinated strikes by multiple aircraft types converging on targets from different altitudes and vectors. The 69 aircraft in the first wave include Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters providing escort and suppression, Yokosuka D4Y Judy dive bombers attacking from high altitude, and Nakajima B6N JIL torpedo bombers executing low-altitude attacks, standard Japanese carrier strike composition refined through years of training. Japanese tactical planning assumes American defensive capabilities can be overwhelmed through coordinated attacks that divide defensive attention while exploiting Japanese aircrew superior training in individual combat maneuvers. Ozawa's intelligence estimates suggest American task force includes 6 fleet carriers with approximately 400 aircraft total, numbers that Japanese planners consider manageable through properly coordinated strikes, achieving tactical surprise. Meanwhile, 200 miles east, Admiral Marc Mitscher commands Task Force 58, whose actual composition includes 15 Essex-class and light fleet carriers operating 956 aircraft organized into systematic defensive and offensive operations that Japanese intelligence underestimated by 100% in carrier numbers and 140% in aircraft strength. The task force operates through integrated command coordinating all carrier air groups simultaneously, creating defensive capabilities that Japanese strike coordination cannot overwhelm. The Essex-class carriers Essex, Yorktown, Intrepid, Hornet, Franklin, Ticonderoga, Randolph, Lexington, Bunker Hill, Wasp, Hancock,
Bennington, and Bonham-Richard operate in 4 carrier task groups maintaining 200-mile separation but coordinated through radio communications, allowing mutual support that Japanese forces cannot prevent or effectively counter. Each carrier maintains ready fighters on deck for immediate launch, while radar-directed combat air patrol flies defensive stations guided by shipboard fighter direction officers tracking incoming raids through radar systems Japanese forces lack. Captain Joseph Clifton, commanding USS Yorktown, CV-10, coordinates his air group through fighter direction officer who tracks Japanese strike formations via radar, providing a 100-mile advance warning. Detection capability that allows Yorktown to launch additional fighters and position combat air patrol for optimal intercept before Japanese formations achieve visual contact with American task force. This systematic defensive coordination, replicated across all American carriers, creates layered defense that Japanese strike planning never anticipated facing. The numerical advantage becomes apparent through American capability to maintain continuous combat air patrol with 140 fighters aloft simultaneously, while retaining sufficient aircraft strength for offensive strikes. Operational tempo that Japanese carriers cannot sustain due to limited aircraft capacity and deck cycling limitations. Essex-Class deck crews trained in systematic aircraft handling launch and recover aircraft at rates exceeding Japanese capabilities by 40%, creating sortie generation advantages that multiply numerical superiority through higher utilization rates.
By 0930 hours, American radar plots track 4 separate Japanese strike formations approaching from west, with total Japanese strength estimated at 370 aircraft, massive strike that represents maximum Japanese carrier aviation capability available for engagement. Japanese tactical planning allocated this strength based on intelligence suggesting 6 American carriers would be overwhelmed by coordinated attacks from 370 aircraft, including experienced aircrews whose individual skills Japanese doctrine considers superior. The American response demonstrates industrial warfare principles as 220 F-6FF Hellcat fighters launch from multiple Essex-Class carriers to intercept Japanese formations at extended range, with fighter direction officers coordinating intercepts through radar vectors guiding American fighters to optimal positions before Japanese formations achieve visual contact with American fleet. The systematic coordination creates engagement geometry favoring American numerical and positional advantages while negating Japanese coordination plans developed for attacking stationary targets. Vice Admiral Ozawa, receiving initial contact reports from strike leaders, confronts information indicating American fighter opposition far exceeding intelligence estimates. Japanese formation leaders report encountering 40 to 50 American fighters per raid, numbers suggesting American carrier strength substantially exceeds intelligence projections. The mathematics become inescapable as continuing contact reports describe American fighter strength that logically requires more carriers than Japanese intelligence considered possible. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell, leading fighter squadrons from USS Essex, coordinates intercepts engaging Japanese formations 60 miles from American carriers, range allowing systematic destruction of Japanese strike aircraft before they achieve attack positions. McCampbell's fighters, operating through radio coordination with fighter direction officers, achieve positional advantages, placing American aircraft in optimal attack positions, while Japanese formations maintain rigid flight discipline, preventing tactical flexibility responding to threats. The engagement demonstrates American training advantages despite Japanese aircrew superiority in individual flight hours, with American pilots operating through systematic procedures that training made automatic, while Japanese pilots rely on individual initiative that coordination difficulties undermine. American fighter tactics emphasize team coordination with multiple fighters supporting each attack, creating local numerical superiority at engagement points that defeats Japanese individual fighter pilot skills through overwhelming firepower concentration. The damage control dimension emerges as Japanese strike aircraft achieving penetration of American fighter defenses confront anti-aircraft firepower from Essex-Class carriers and escorting vessels exceeding anything in Japanese experience.
The integrated anti-aircraft defense coordinates through radar fire control systems, allowing engagement at ranges where Japanese aircrew cannot effectively target American vessels, creating additional attrition that reduces already depleted strike formations. Between 1,000 and 1,400 hours, the air battles later nicknamed the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot demonstrate the mathematical and industrial superiority of Essex-Class carriers through systematic destruction of Japanese carrier aviation. American fighters destroyed 243 Japanese aircraft during 4 separate strike waves, while losing 29 American aircraft, creating 8-to-1 kill ratio that reflects not just superior aircraft or pilot training, but systematic advantages in radar direction, numerical strength, and coordinated tactics that Japanese forces cannot counter. The Essex-Class carrier's aircraft capacity proves decisive as American task force maintains defensive fighter coverage while simultaneously launching offensive strikes against Japanese carriers. This operational capability, defending task force while attacking enemy carriers, represents functionality the Japanese limited aircraft capacity cannot achieve, forcing Japanese carriers to choose between defense and offense while American carriers execute both missions simultaneously. American strike aircraft locate Japanese carrier forces at maximum range during afternoon, with formations from Essex, Lexington, and Enterprise launching coordinated attacks despite depleting American fighter strength through defensive operations. This sustained operational capability demonstrates Essex-Class endurance that Japanese carriers cannot match, with American carriers maintaining high sortie rates through superior aircraft capacity, trained deck crews, and systematic procedures that Japanese carriers' smaller complements and less developed procedures cannot replicate. The submarine USS Albacore's torpedo attack, striking carrier Taiho at 0909 hours, initiates catastrophic damage sequence that Taiho's inadequate damage control cannot prevent. Aviation fuel vapors spreading through ventilation systems create explosive atmosphere that detonates at 1532 hours, destroying Taiho through internal explosions that kill 1,650 crew, including Vice Admiral Ozawa's staff officers. The loss demonstrates Japanese carrier vulnerability that Essex-Class damage control systems specifically addressed through compartmentalized fuel systems and CO2 flooding, preventing vapor accumulation. The carrier Shokaku, struck by 3 torpedoes from USS Kavala at 1220 hours, suffers similar fate as inadequate damage control allows flooding and fires to spread uncontrollably until internal explosions destroy the ship at 1501 hours, with loss of 1,263 crew. These catastrophic losses from single torpedo hits contrast sharply with Essex-Class survivability that allows continued operations after similar damage through systematic damage control that Japanese carriers never implemented effectively. By 1800 hours, the tactical picture reveals Japanese losses including 2 fleet carriers sunk, 243 aircraft destroyed, and surviving carrier air groups so depleted that Japanese offensive carrier capability ceases to exist. American losses of 29 aircraft and 0 ships demonstrate the mathematical impossibility of Japanese victory when industrial capacity creates force regeneration that tactical excellence cannot overcome. The Essex-Class carriers returned to operations maintaining full capability despite intense combat, demonstrating operational endurance that Japanese carriers never achieved. In August 1943, Commander Katsumori Yamashiro had dismissed PT boats as mosquitoes, insignificant pests that posed no real threat to the Imperial Japanese Navy's powerful destroyers. 4 weeks later, Yamashiro was dead, his destroyer Amagiri sunk by the plywood boat he had mocked. The transformation from contempt to respect happened with brutal speed, measured in sinking ships and drowning sailors. The PT boat story is ultimately about asymmetric warfare, using unconventional weapons to defeat conventional forces through superior tactics and aggressive execution. Japanese destroyers had every advantage: size, armor, firepower, speed, and range. Yet American PT boats sank them regularly because the PT boat crews understood something fundamental. Advantages only matter if you can bring them to bear. In darkness, at close range, with surprise, most conventional advantages became irrelevant. At the PT Boat Museum in Fall River, Massachusetts, a restored Elco 80-footer sits among other maritime artifacts. Visitors marvel at its small size, its wooden construction, its apparently inadequate armament. Museum guides explain how these fragile craft sank destroyers, and visitors struggle to believe it. On the museum wall hangs a plaque with a quote from a captured Japanese destroyer officer, recorded during interrogation in 1944. His words captured the complete reversal of Japanese attitudes toward PT boats. "We laughed when we first encountered them. Wooden boats attacking steel warships, it seemed absurd. Then they sank our destroyers. Then they sank more destroyers. Then we stopped laughing and started fearing. Every night in waters where these boats operated, we feared. Darkness that once protected us became our enemy because that's when they attacked. We never saw them until too late. We never heard them until torpedoes struck. They transformed from toys into nightmares. That's not luck. That's superior tactics combined with courage we didn't expect from men in wooden boats. They earned our respect the hard way, by defeating us repeatedly when we thought we were invincible." The Japanese Navy never expected PT boats to sink destroyers. By war's end, they had learned that expectation mattered less than reality, and the reality was that plywood boats, crewed by determined Americans, could destroy steel warships through tactics that turned weakness into strength. The Mosquitoes had proven themselves wolves, and the lessons written in oil slicks and burning metal would influence naval warfare for generations to come.
By June 25, 1944, Japanese naval headquarters confronts tactical reports from Philippine Sea operations revealing American carrier strength that exceeds every intelligence estimate by margins that challenge fundamental strategic assumptions. Admiral Soemo Toyota, reviewing loss assessments showing 2 fleet carriers sunk, 395 aircraft destroyed, and surviving carrier air groups reduced to operational ineffectiveness, must acknowledge that American naval capabilities transcend anything Japanese planning anticipated. The intelligence failure becomes apparent through post-battle analysis revealing American task force included 15 fleet carriers plus 9 light carriers, a total of 24 carrier decks operating nearly 1,000 aircraft, compared to Japanese intelligence estimates of 6 to 8 American carriers with 450 aircraft. This 300% underestimate of American carrier strength indicates systematic intelligence failure that prevented accurate strategic assessment of American industrial mobilization, creating carrier forces exceeding Japanese maximum possible strength. Captain Toshikazu Omae, analyzing American carrier operations for combined fleet staff, calculates that observed American carrier strength requires shipbuilding production rates impossible according to traditional naval construction timelines. Omae's analysis concludes that American industrial capacity has achieved carrier construction velocities that our doctrine considered impossible, creating fleet expansion that our strategy cannot counter through combat attrition when American replacement rates exceed our maximum available strength. The implications extend beyond immediate tactical defeat to encompass strategic recognition that American Essex-Class production creates mathematical impossibility for Japanese victory. If American shipyards produce 1 fleet carrier every 67 days, while Japanese construction requires 24 to 30 months per carrier, the production differential renders combat exchange ratios strategically meaningless when American replacement capacity continuously exceeds Japanese sinking capability. Admiral Mineichi Koga,
Toyota's predecessor, killed in aircraft accident during March 1944, had submitted classified assessments warning that American industrial capacity created naval expansion that Japanese forces could not match through combat effectiveness alone. Koga's analysis, vindicated by Philippine Sea results, acknowledged that American carrier production represents industrial warfare where manufacturing capacity determines strategic outcomes more decisively than tactical excellence or individual ship quality. The human dimension emerges through Japanese naval aviator accounts describing psychological impact of confronting American carrier forces whose numerical superiority and operational capabilities exceeded anything Japanese training or doctrine prepared them to face. Lieutenant Zenji Abe, surviving Philippine Sea operations after ditching damaged aircraft, describes American defenses as impenetrable wall of fighters operating through coordination and numbers that individual Japanese pilot skill cannot overcome, supported by carriers whose quantity makes our tactical victories strategically irrelevant.
The October 1944 Battle of Leyte Gulf demonstrates Essex-Class carrier operational maturity as American forces deploy 17 Essex-Class carriers plus additional light carriers, creating naval aviation strength that Japanese forces cannot effectively engage. The Third Fleet under Admiral William Halsey operates Task Force 38 with 12 Essex-Class carriers, while 7th Fleet escort carriers provide additional aviation support, creating American carrier presence that Japanese forces recognize as overwhelming before engagement commences. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, commanding Japanese center force during Leyte operations, receives intelligence reports describing American carrier strength that Japanese naval staff recognizes makes successful surface engagement impossible without accepting complete destruction. Kurita's battle plan assumes Japanese surface forces can achieve surprise attack against American invasion fleet before carrier aircraft achieve effective response, calculation that underestimates American carrier operational capabilities proven during Philippine Sea. The effectiveness of Essex-Class carriers manifests through sustained operations that Japanese forces cannot match, with American carriers launching 500-plus sorties daily while maintaining defensive fighter coverage and executing reconnaissance missions simultaneously. This operational tempo, sustained over multiple days without degradation, demonstrates capabilities that Japanese limited carrier numbers and aircraft capacity cannot approach. Captain James Flatley, commanding Air Group 5 aboard USS Franklin, coordinates strikes against Japanese center force that sink battleship Musashi through concentrated attacks that Japanese anti-aircraft defenses cannot repel. The Musashi engagement demonstrates American capability to mass aviation strength from multiple carriers against single high-value target, operational coordination that Japanese dispersed carrier forces cannot achieve effectively. The battle off Cape Engano on October 25th reveals Japanese desperation as remaining Japanese carriers Zuikaku, Zuiho, Chitose, and Chiyoda operate as decoys without effective air groups, attempting to draw American carriers away from invasion fleet while Japanese surface forces attack amphibious shipping. The deception succeeds temporarily, but results in complete destruction of Japanese decoy force, eliminating final Japanese fleet carriers, while American Essex-Class carriers continue operations without significant damage. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, commanding Japanese carrier decoy force, acknowledges in post-battle reports that our carriers operated without effective air groups against American forces whose carrier aviation strength rendered our vessels obsolete as effective combat units. The disparity between American carrier capabilities and our remaining strength made sacrifice inevitable while achieving minimal strategic effect.
Japanese adoption of kamikaze tactics during Leyte operations represents implicit acknowledgement that conventional carrier aviation cannot compete effectively against American Essex-Class carriers whose numerical superiority, aircraft capacity, and defensive capabilities overwhelmed Japanese conventional attack capabilities. The Special Attack Forces, organizing suicide attacks by pilots with minimal training, attempt to achieve through sacrifice what skilled aviators could not accomplish through conventional tactics. The Essex-Class damage control systems proved decisive against kamikaze attacks, with carriers surviving direct hits that would destroy Japanese carriers through systematic damage control that contains fires, maintains propulsion, and preserves aviation operations. USS Franklin survives 2 kamikaze hits during October 1944 while maintaining reduced operations, demonstrating survivability that Japanese carrier design never achieved. The kamikaze campaign achieves tactical successes, including damaging several Essex-class carriers, but fails strategically through American damage control preventing catastrophic losses, while industrial production replaces damaged carriers faster than kamikaze attacks can achieve decisive results. USS Intrepid, damaged by kamikaze attack during November 1944, returns to operations after 3-week repair period, while new Essex-class carriers Bennington and Boxer enter service, maintaining American carrier strength despite combat losses. Captain Rikihei Inaguchi, organizing kamikaze operations from Philippines bases, submits assessments acknowledging that American carrier damage control systems allow survival and return to operations after hits that would sink our carriers, while their industrial capacity replaces damaged vessels faster than special attack forces can achieve decisive results. The mathematical relationship favors American industrial superiority over our tactical innovations. The psychological burden on Japanese pilots executing kamikaze missions reflects recognition that conventional victory against American carrier superiority has become impossible, with suicide attacks representing final desperate attempt to inflict sufficient losses that American political will might waver. This strategic calculation proves incorrect as American industrial capacity absorbs kamikaze damage while maintaining overwhelming carrier superiority throughout Pacific operations. The April-June 1945 Battle of Okinawa demonstrates complete American carrier dominance as Task Force 58 operates continuously for 3 months, providing aviation support that Japanese forces cannot effectively counter. The Essex-class carriers, Essex, Yorktown, Intrepid, Hornet, Franklin, Ticonderoga, Randolph, Lexington, Bunker Hill, Wasp, and Hancock maintained station off Okinawa despite intensive kamikaze attacks, demonstrating operational endurance that Japanese forces never achieved in any campaign. The sustained operations capability proves decisive, with American carriers launching 3,000-plus sorties weekly while simultaneously maintaining defensive combat air patrol, conducting anti-submarine operations, and supporting amphibious forces ashore. This multi-mission capability, executing offensive strikes, defending task force, and supporting ground forces simultaneously, represents operational sophistication that Japanese limited carrier capacity could never achieve. USS Franklin survives catastrophic kamikaze damage on March 19, 1945, when 2 bombs penetrate flight deck, igniting fueled and armed aircraft, creating massive fires and explosions that kill 724 crew. The carrier's survival through damage control that contains fires preventing magazine explosions demonstrates Essex-class survivability that Japanese carriers never approached. Franklin returns to United States for repair, but remains afloat and under power despite damage that would have destroyed any Japanese carrier. Lieutenant Commander Joseph O'Callaghan, Franklin's Catholic chaplain, who earns Medal of Honor for damage control leadership during crisis, describes Essex-class survivability. The ship was designed to survive battle damage through compartmentalized systems, redundant capabilities, and trained damage control parties who knew exactly what to do when disaster struck. We saved Franklin because her design anticipated severe damage and provided means to survive what would sink ships lacking these features. The Japanese kamikaze campaign against Okinawa invasion fleet achieves highest Japanese sortie rates of entire war, but fails strategically through American damage control, limiting catastrophic losses, while replacement carriers arrive from United States, maintaining task force strength. The USS Bunker Hill, severely damaged by kamikaze hits on May 11, 1945, withdraws for repair, while USS Bonhomme Richard arrives maintaining American carrier presence at levels Japanese forces cannot reduce through attrition. Japanese naval officers observing Okinawa operations acknowledge that American carrier operations demonstrate capabilities that Japanese doctrine never anticipated, and Japanese industrial capacity could never match. The sustained presence of 15 to 18 American carriers operating continuously for 3 months represents operational capability that Japanese maximum carrier strength could not approach even during 1942, when Japanese carrier forces achieved peak strength. By August 1945, surviving Japanese naval leadership confronts the mathematical and industrial reality that Essex-Class carrier production has created American naval superiority that Japanese forces cannot challenge through any available means. Admiral Suemu Toyota, reviewing strategic assessments for homeland defense planning, acknowledges that Essex-Class carrier superiority extends beyond numerical advantages to encompass operational capabilities, aircraft capacity, damage survivability, and industrial replacement rates that render conventional naval resistance futile. The statistical comparison proves devastating. American forces operate 24 Essex-Class carriers, plus additional light carriers and escort carriers, totaling over 100 carrier decks, while Japanese surviving carrier strength includes 0 operational fleet carriers with effective air groups. The complete elimination of Japanese carrier striking power contrasts with American carrier strength that continues expanding through ongoing construction programs that will add 6 additional Essex-Class carriers during 1945-46. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, surviving Philippine Sea and Cape Engano defeats, submits classified assessments acknowledging that Essex-Class carriers represent industrial warfare achievement that Japanese shipbuilding capacity could never approach. Individual carrier capabilities exceed our designs, while production rates create numerical superiority that tactical excellence cannot overcome. The combination of quality and quantity through industrial mass production creates capabilities that traditional naval warfare concepts cannot counter. The technical analysis proves equally sobering, as Japanese naval architects studying captured American documents and photographs of Essex-Class carriers recognize design sophistication that Japanese engineering never achieved. The damage control systems, aircraft capacity, anti-aircraft armament, and operational endurance represent integrated design philosophy, emphasizing sustained combat operations rather than individual engagement superiority. Captain Toshikazu Omai's final assessment captures Japanese naval recognition of strategic defeat through industrial means. American victory derived not from superior tactics or individual ship quality, but from industrial capacity creating carrier forces whose numerical strength, operational capabilities, and replacement rates rendered our maximum possible strength insufficient regardless of tactical execution. The Essex-Class program demonstrates how industrial warfare operates through manufacturing superiority that conventional military excellence cannot overcome. The Essex-Class carrier success establishes principles that define post-war naval aviation through demonstrating that mass production, operational endurance, and damage survivability constitute capabilities as significant as individual ship quality. The 24 Essex-Class carriers built during 1942-45 represent largest single warship class by displacement ever constructed, demonstrating American industrial capacity applied to systematic carrier production that other nations never approached. The design longevity proves remarkable as Essex-Class carriers remain operational through 1970s with extensive modernization programs, demonstrating original design excellence that allows adaptation to jet aircraft operations and modern combat systems. USS Lexington serves until 1991 as training carrier, representing 48-year service life that validates original design philosophy, emphasizing operational flexibility and upgrade capacity. The damage control revolution pioneered in Essex-Class design becomes foundational for all subsequent American carrier construction, with compartmentalized systems, redundant capabilities, and trained damage control parties remaining central to American naval architecture through contemporary supercarriers. The systematic approach to battle damage survivability that Essex-Class carriers demonstrated establishes American naval design philosophy, emphasizing survivability as equal priority with offensive capabilities. Soviet naval development programs studying Essex-Class carriers through intelligence sources recognize American achievements but lack industrial capacity for comparable carrier production, leading Soviet naval strategy towards submarine emphasis rather than attempting carrier competition, where American industrial advantages prove insurmountable. The strategic recognition that carrier warfare requires industrial capacity beyond Soviet capabilities influences Cold War naval development fundamentally. The human dimension captures how Essex-Class carrier crews understood they operated weapons platforms representing American industrial superiority as much as naval combat capabilities. The sailors and aviators serving aboard Essex-Class carriers recognized their ships embodied systematic advantages that transcended individual skill or courage through creating capabilities that enemy forces could not match regardless of tactical excellence or strategic innovation. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commanding Pacific Fleet operations throughout Essex-Class carrier deployment, summarizes their strategic impact. The Essex-Class carriers provided consistent, reliable, devastating naval aviation power that we could depend on day after day, month after month. Their numbers meant we always had adequate strength, their aircraft capacity provided overwhelming striking power, and their survivability ensured they kept fighting after damage that would sink other ships. They represent industrial warfare achieving strategic dominance through systematic production of excellent ships in numbers that rendered enemy resistance mathematically futile. The final accounting reveals that American shipyards constructed 24 Essex-Class carriers during 1942-1945 at average cost of $78 million per vessel, representing 6% of total American wartime military production budget, while creating naval aviation capabilities that determined Pacific War outcome as decisively as any weapons system deployed. The cost-effectiveness of achieving strategic naval superiority through systematic carrier production that overwhelmed enemy capabilities proves as significant as the technical excellence of individual vessels.
Japanese post-war naval analyses studying Essex-Class carriers acknowledge that American achievement represented industrial capacity applied to systematic weapons production, creating military capabilities that traditional naval powers could not match through craftsmanship or individual excellence. The Essex-Class program demonstrates conclusively that modern warfare operates through industrial principles where manufacturing capacity determines strategic outcomes more decisively than individual weapon quality, when production scale creates overwhelming numerical advantages that tactical skill cannot overcome.